Cassie here from Prim Heirloom Designs, and today I'm going to take you through how I make my cute little kitchen witch. She has a soft sculpted head, so she's completely made out of fabric, so you do not have to do clay work for this one unless you want to. And she's done with some William Morris fabrics for the fun prints. And this one is holding a little bunch of mushrooms and a wooden bowl. So yeah, join me for the process. So we're gonna start. I've got all of my pattern pieces either traced or cut to size. For the clothing, I tend to really like William Morris fabrics for these. They're just so woodsy, folksy looking, and they look really good with the kitchen witch. So, and I tend to just rip the fabric because I like the unfinished edges. And also, when you're working with the cotton, if you rip it, it will rip in a straight line. So I get really consistent size squares without having to take the time to measure. So I've got, these are my sleeves, and this is the body cover. This is the actual skirt piece. I've got my little apron, and this is the headscarf. And if sometimes you're working with a fabric that you can't rip, you do have to cut, and that's fine. If you want a bit of a rough edge, just kind of, pick at it to try to roughen it up a little. Then I've got the body, the head, and the hands. So for the body and the hands, you're going to be stitching directly on the pattern line. And for the body, you're going to be leaving this bottom section open. And for the hands, this top part open. And I like to stitch at a 1.5 stitch length for that, just to give me lots of strength in there for turning out these little thumbs. Then, and this is just on a rougher weave muslin fabric. You can choose whatever you want. Something with no stretch and just a plain kind of cotton. This piece will not be seen. These are the hands. You can even do, or the gloves. You can do other colors if you wanted. But simplest is just to work with plain kind of cottons. And I've gone for more like a fine quilter's cotton for the head. And this is going to be soft sculptured. So I'm going to start by, I'm going to go back and start with the easiest piece, which is the body. And I'm going to proceed to sew directly on this line all the way around. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that, but I've stitched directly on there. I can pull this pin out. And now I'm going to cut approximately 1/4 of an inch away from that stitch line. And now we want to box in these bottom edges. So I'm just going to open this up and flatten it out and try to match the seam so that this bottom piece is lying on this top seam, and that feels pretty good. And I'm going to throw in a pin just to hold it there, and my stitch line is going to be directly across here. So you could extend that line for a visual, or you can just eyeball it. It does not have to be perfect because this is not a visible part. Okay, like that. So I'm just gonna go ahead and sew along each of those. So you're gonna be left with something that kind of looks like this. And so now we can turn this out. I'm gonna use my trusty hemostats for that. I find it easiest. You can also use turning tubes and try to pull out any corners and come up here and take that neck. There you go. And now we can already go ahead and stuff this. I like to stuff it fairly firm, and I'll start just right up in that neck. Okay, and so then once you've got that stuffed, you're just going to come down here and just kind of fold that both sides under, and I'm just going to do a whip stitch across to close that up. Okay, and then this piece can just get put aside for now. The next one we'll look at is the gloves. So for this one, again, we're going to stitch directly on this line with a very close stitch setting on your machine, and this bottom part will get left open. Okay, so again, you can see that I've stitched all around and I've left this bottom open. So I'm going to cut right along that bottom edge, and I'm going to go probably 1/8 of an inch around the rest of this. And you can just, don't go too close to that stitch line, but you're just going to do a few slits to help this turn out nice and rounded. Okay, and we're going to do the same to the other one. Okay, and so this is definitely a point where you want to bring out your micro turning tubes. And I'm going to grab my smallest one and go in and try to push that out. It may take a couple of up and downs, but you'll get that through. Okay, and then you can actually pull the whole thing through. And then you can go up there and either go with this, or you can come back with the hemostats and go in with that long nose and open up that hand. And usually one end of these will fit up there to turn it all the way out. And we can already get the wire in these. So I use these pipe cleaners, and I need 2 for this part. And I'm basically going to take it so the pipe cleaner is just a little bit longer than the hand, and I'm going to curve it because I want to get this part up in to that palm, or to the finger area. So push that up in there to give it some structure. Make sure that this hasn't flipped out on you, that it's still fully turned out. And then this end, you're just going to take it and gently put it up into your thumb to give that thumb some wire. And then I just close this up. And then to make sure it doesn't shift too much, I'll throw a little bit of hot glue inside, just a little dab, to make sure nothing shifts, just at that wrist area. Okay, and then this will enable you to like put things in our hands to be able to bend that. And the next thing is the face. For this, I've drawn both pieces. So this piece just gets cut out along the lines. This is the 2 back parts of the head. So I can go ahead and cut that out directly on that line. So then that's ready. And on the head, or the front of the face, 1.5 stitch length. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to sew, starting up at this point, I'm going to sew down directly on this line around all the way down to here. Okay, so I'm going to go do that. I'm going to come along, and so when I cut it out, I can cut directly along the lines that I have not sewn, which would be that bottom, and along this back, and along this top. And now in here, I'm going to cut that edge down. I don't want to come too close to my sewn line. I'm going to come around like this. And then we're going to come in and do those little slits, not too close, to help that fabric bend when you go to stuff it. This will help prevent some of the wrinkles that you'll get when you stuff. I'm just going to jump up and do this one. There, just like that. And so now if you're going to take these pieces, so I'm going to open this up and put it like that. And I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance all along that edge. Okay, so it looks like that. And I'm going to take that other piece and do the same. Again, make sure that you've got this oriented. This is the bottom because it's got a bit of a neck cut out, and this is the top. All right, and then the last thing is this back edge. You're going to want to stitch it with a 1/4 inch seam allowance from up here and then go all the way around and end down here and leave this bottom part open for stuffing. All right, so we've got something like this. This is the bottom that still is open. And so now we got to turn this out. I like my hemostats for that. I'm just going to go into the nose first, pull it out, and then I'm going to go back in and grab up in that head area to turn the whole thing out. Okay, and make sure you got it right out to the seam, which I do. Don't worry too much about this area. Those are more just for indicators that this is where the chin starts and this is where the mouth goes. All right, so we're going to start to stuff that. The head, you want to stuff it evenly and fairly firmly because we are going to be needle sculpting it. So I'll start in the nose area first. What I like about the hemostats is I can go in with the stuffing and open it up and kind of spread this head wide so that it just helps give the shape that it's meant to have. Just really push out so that it's stuffed right to the seams. And then you're eventually just kind of stuffing in the center and working your way around. And that's how you get a really nice smooth shaping rather than adding lumps into the sides. And as I come down here, I'm going to get into that chin. Okay, and pretty much when you can't get any more stuffing in there, then it's done. We're just going to close up the bottom of that neck. So again, you'll turn the raw edges under as well as you can. This area is not going to be visible. And we're just going to do a little bit of a whip stitch across. Okay, so you're going to be starting like that. And you can manipulate a little bit if you see that something's kind of not even or lined up before we start to do the needle sculpting. All right, so for the needle sculpting, you're going to want a 3-inch long needle or a bit longer. Mine's a little bent, but that won't matter. Some matching thread for the head. I like Gutermann, just the all-purpose. It's nice and strong, and I do I double over the strand and knot it at the bottom. And then I have a little ruler here because we have to do some measuring, a pencil, and some scissors for cutting my thread. So we're going to start with doing some measurements here. So you have an idea of where we're going with this one. So this gives you an idea of where we're headed with the needle sculpting. So what we do is we do the nose first, then we come back in and locate the eyes and do them, then the mouth, and then the sidelines. It's and then I just kind of drew on this one so I could see how it was going to look, and I like it because she's got a nice little grin there. So that's our goal. So starting with this head, I've taken as many measurements as I can so that you have an easier time to repeat what I'm doing. I'm going to measure from this intersection point down this seam about 25 millimeters. So you kind of have to take your ruler, bend it a little bit, do your best to hold it in place, and mark. You could use a pin for this, but I just put a little mark there. So that's 25 millimeters down. So that's where I want my nose to start. And then from that point, I'm going to measure out 4 millimeters on either side because that'll be my stitch line, which will be starting there. And then on the other side, you can eyeball any of this. I just want to do this for those of you that really want the exact measurements that maybe aren't as comfortable with it. Okay. And then I'm going to do another one down here about 4 millimeters out, just so that it gives, so that I have a greater chance of making a straight line there. Okay, like that. And actually that's about the right length. So, so then I'm going to go down here. So this line should be fairly straight because I've measured 4 millimeters from there and 4 millimeters from there, and same with this side. The length that I want this line to actually be is going to be 10 millimeters. So now I'm going to check, and I'm just shy of 10. So I'm going to add, whoops. I'm going to add a little bit more to my line, about a millimeter short, and that's where it'll end. And I'll do the same to this side. Okay. And then we're going to come out. You can see that we're kind of down to where this nose starts to curve around. I want to make a line like that, about 8 millimeters long. I'm at 9, so I'll just take a smidgen off of that. And I'll do the same on this side. This one I do eyeball because it's really hard to give a measurement for this area. If her nose is crooked, I think that just adds a little bit to the character, so I don't concern myself with that. Okay, you can tell I'm a little bit off, but I'm really not going to worry. So that's about 8 millimeters down. Then we're going to, so I'm going to measure up 2 millimeters, which is 1, 2, about there. And that, I also want it 2 millimeters from this edge. So I got to bring it in a little bit more. About there is where that's going to be. So that dot should be, whoops, about 2 millimeters from that line and 2 millimeters from your bottom line. And we're going to repeat that on the other side. They're just little assist points. And then the next thing is for the nostril. You're looking at 8 millimeters from the nose tip. So that's about here. And I'm going to pop one there. And I'm just going to visually choose. You can try to measure the other side, no problem. I'm just going to visually put one there and one there. So those are going to be where my nostrils are. So now we can start stitching this. So I'm going to start at the top. I'm going to go in and I'm going to come back and lock that stitch so that if your knot is smaller, and even if it's that big, sometimes it can actually pull through. So I'm just going to double loop on my needle and pull that tight so it's not going anywhere. And then you can Google ladder stitch. I'm probably going to do it opposite of you because I am left-handed. But essentially, you're just coming in the top, coming down to take a small stitch. I like to get 3 to 4 along this line. So you're scooping fabric, coming over to the other side where it started, coming down about the same length, going across. And the reason you're doing this is because you're going to be able to pull on it and start to create that bit of a nose bridge. So I'm going to come back in again about the same length. Each time you're just trying to scoop a little bit of that stuffing in there. And then, yeah, so I've got 3 stitches that I've got in here until I come to that point. And you're basically going to continue this until you hit the bottom of this line. So I'm still going to go in, scoop, even though we're transitioning to a angle there. I'm still going to do the same thing. And then I'm going to come just in one of these previous stitches, bring it back. And knot off. And now I'm going to come in. I want to get those nostrils pulled up a little. So I'm going to come in, let's see, I can show you, in and around here. And I'm going to be going down into that nostril, out here, down into that nostril, out here, and then I may or may not repeat that, depends on how defined it gets. So let's just go up to, oh, kind of going where that bridge transitions is the best way to explain it. I'm trying to find, get my needle in there. There, so I'm coming up in there. And I'm gonna go down one. Actually, I'm gonna go up one just because I should have come in a little bit higher there. And I'm gonna go down to that little circle we made and try to come to the inside like that of it. Because you don't, when you're needle sculpting, you don't want to take anything much smaller than a 1/8 of a stitch, of a 1/8 of an inch of a stitch like that, or you might just break your fabric. And I'm going to come back up into that area. I'm not going to pull too tightly yet, and then I'm going to come back down and do this other side. And from here, I'm going to go over from there, so I'm not going to pull my stitch out. I come back up into that corner and pull a little bit and start to see how it's looking. Okay, kind of like that. It's kind of widening it a little bit in that area. So then I'm going to go ahead and take another stitch just in that corner again. I'm staying within that seam line, within that stitch line. And then from back here, you can do your final pulls of how you want. Look at it at the sides. Most important, because that's where you'll be seeing that nose. And now we're going to lock that stitch. So I'm pulling it taut right now. And I'm just going to go in there. And this one's not under that much pressure, so it's easy to show you. And I'm just locking it. And once I've gotten it in there once, I can come back in and do a nice reinforcement on it. Whoops. Like that. Next, we'll be doing the eyes. So I'm going to take this and basically start at that little dot again. Can measure down 4 millimeters, and that's going to be where your eye line is going to be. So this is going to be about there. Okay, so that's where my center line for my eyes is going to be. And you could even come in, since this top is the same as this, you come in here straight down to get a better idea of where that's going to be, which is here. And then on this side. Okay, those should be fairly in line. Now the eye starts 4 millimeters from this edge. So we're gonna try, it's hard because you've got that nose jutting out there, but you're gonna try to measure 4 millimeters. So that's the start of my eye is there. So I don't need this other little bit. And then it's gonna be 8 millimeters wide. So if you want, you can just mark that out as straight as you can. And I'm actually nicely at 8 millimeters, so that's good. So I'm just going to put a little dot there because this will help me with my needle sculpting. And we'll do the same on this side. So I'm going to measure out the 4 millimeters. So it gets a little hard to hold that ruler. about there. And then 8 millimeters. Again, I think I'm just going to hand draw it in first. And then I'm going to see the length. 5, 6, 7, 8 to here. Okay. So what we're going to do around the eyes is we're going to use that 1/8 distance rule, and we're going to be coming in and out to define these eye sockets almost. You can see what I did here is they're these lines, and we'll start with the outer one first. So again, I'm going to come to this back area, kind of in line with the eyes, I would say. And I'm going to make sure that I lock that stitch. And I'm going to come in above. You can draw in 8 millimeters if you want. I'm just going to eyeball it. So I'm going to come in about there. And then there in the bottom. And then I'm going to come across and do the same in here. I'm going to come in the top and in the bottom. Okay, and then you're going to pull. You're going to push and pull. That'll help get that in there. And this will define like how deep you want them. And this is where it gets tricky. You do have to do your best to hold that stitch where it is. And this time I've got my finger on it. I'm holding that stitch. I'm going to take a couple of just actual stitches in there, and that will help do like a bit of a pre-locking so that it shouldn't go too far on me, that I should be able to even pull my finger out. I'm not pushing as hard now, and you can check it. Now, if you've messed it up and you want to go deeper, you can always just repeat over top of that. It's not a big deal. It's very hard to hold this tightly enough in order to get that nice and to get it where you want. So that's why you kind of have to over push it. Can take a lot of finger strength. So now we're going to go in to, and I still believe I've got enough length on my thread. Always look for that. I'm going to go in and do the inners. So I'll come back in here somewhere. And lock it. And then I'm going to come into the inners. And these you're going to want to bring in further. So again, I'm going in the top. I'm looking at about 1/8 down, out the back. And then over and do the top. All right, and you'll be gently pushing. And that looks pretty good. Just a slight defining. If you pull too tightly, it starts to look a little bit weird. So just kind of play with where you want it. I like that. So again, I'm going to hold that. I've got it under tension. And I'm going to throw in a couple of stitches. And now I'm going to lock it. And hopefully it hasn't shifted on me. Oh, that's not too bad. Okay, so I'm going to rethread. With needle sculpting, huge tip, always have more thread on that needle than you think you're going to need, because you forget how much you lose when you're moving from such distances. Okay, so the next thing is the mouth. So as I said before, you had these two stitch lines that you can kind of see very prominently. And this upper one, it measures, if you were to measure this, it's about 3 millimeters down from this point. But it is this spot where we're gonna put the mouth. And I like 6 millimeters in either direction. Looks good to me. So I'm just going to, again, pull out my ruler and hold it as best as I can. And that's about 6 there. Again, you can eyeball it. Oh, my eyes aren't working. 5, 6, there we go. All right, have a look to make sure that your little dots are kind of in line with each other. I'm just gonna lightly draw that in so I know where I'm going. Okay, and yeah, and when I talk about the 1/8, you can even just kind of draw it in a little bit of a line so you know where you're going. All right, so for the mouth, we're gonna come in more from the side. That's more in line with the mouth. So I'm gonna start my stitching there. And lock it. And basically what you're gonna be doing is from here, you're gonna be going over to this side. Then you're going to come to this side and you're going to come out on the other end because you're trying to suck the mouth in a little bit. So if you want to follow along, I'm inserting from there. I'm going to come in that top of this opposite side, like about there. And then in this bottom, and then you're going to go straight across to this side, top. Then the bottom, and you're going to come directly out behind this side seam, like that. And then you're going to pull. And you see that pulls the mouth inwards a little bit. All right. And I'm going to leave it like that. I've got all of my tension. I'm holding it. Come in. I got my nail holding it down. And lock that stitch. All right. The last step on this for the needle sculpting, I know it's a lot, is the age lines, which is kind of cool. That's how she ends up with this nice big smile in the end, which I love. So it rounds out the face a little bit more. Got our upper dot that we did up here. And the other dot we need to make is about 4 millimeters from this edge. 4 millimeters out is about here. I am up a little bit. I'm kind of like extending, thinking like a happy smile kind of idea. Yep, that's about 4. And to me, that looks more even. Okay. So for these ones, we're going to start up by the eye, in behind the eye area. Again, in the back of the head, kind of behind that side seam. And lock it. And now we're going to come in from up here to that top dot. Push that nose out of the way if you need to. And then into this one. And I'm going to come back up into that eye area. So I'm kind of bringing it upwards. And by doing that, I think that's what causes that nice smile shape to happen. And I'm going to use my nail in here to really put that under tension and create that wrinkle kind of, right? And you see her already smiling. And yeah, I love it. So, oh, that's not the end though. I'm coming in there. You can release that tension if you want a little bit, then come back in to that same lower location. And then I'm going to go a little bit, probably 1/8 of an inch towards that mouth. Okay. And come back up to that eye area. And now I'm going to really pull on it and use my finger to help manipulate it. So you've got this nice line forming. as much as you want. I like that. I really like her smiling. So again, you're going to have to hold this under a lot of tension. Okay, so again, we're going to come in behind that eye. And I'm going to come into that upper marking we made down here and back up to the eye area. An initial kind of pull. Okay, then back in to that same bottom dot. And I'm going to go about 1/8 of an inch towards that mouth. And I'm going to come back up out at the eye area. And then I'm going to pull. And here you're going to want to try to match what you have on the other side. Really helps to be doing the needle sculpting with a hard surface under you when you're trying to hold it this much under tension. So that's what we're starting with. So you can decide, you can either paint it with, and actually if you don't want to needle sculpt, this is kind of what it ends up looking like. If you just want to do a simple head that wasn't needle sculpted, it doesn't look bad. So you could try that. But I've got a mixture over here. This is it's a watered down coffee mixture. It might be too dark for you. This is, I think, a 2-to-1 of instant coffee to water. You can always go much lighter. You can paint her instead in like a flesh tone, whatever you want. But I think I'm gonna just do this, and then we'll add in some stuff with pencil crayons and whatnot afterwards, like that. So while that head dries, before we can work with it, we're gonna move on to the clothing. So continuing on with the body, I'm gonna start with the skirt and the arms. So for the skirt, you're just gonna wanna fold this in half, and we're gonna sew along that edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And for the arms, you're going to fold it so that this is the longest length, the 3 inches is going this way. And these are going to get sewn along the edge as well. Okay, so you can already turn out the skirt. So that that's ready to go. And then for the arms, and I come in and just do a small running stitch about a 1/4 inch from that upper edge. Okay, pull that tight and lock that stitch. Put that aside and do the same with the other one. Alrighty, the next step is you're going to cover this body with the cover fabric. So I'm going to take it like a diamond shape and position this so that it's roughly in the middle. Fold this front down. My bottom meets it. Nice and smooth on both sides. And I'm going to go ahead and add some pins so they don't shift on me. Just one on either side's good. And then come into this side, and we're going to kind of create a bit of a crease to take up that extra fabric. And again, pin that towards the bottom. And the same on this side. Okay, so you end up with a front and a back, and that's how the bottom looks. So take your thread And we're gonna just start towards this bottom. So maybe about a 1/4 inch maximum from the actual bottom of the body. And I'm just doing a running stitch. It's really just enough to tack this in place. As you come around, you can remove those pins. And now I'm going to come back in with a longer piece of thread because now we're going to start on the skirt. All right, so make sure you, again, if you've got a pattern, you want to orient it so that you're facing it the correct way. And this seam will be at the very back. So I'll start at the seam and I'm going to start from the inside so that my knot's hidden in behind. I'm just going to do a bit of a running stitch around the upper edge, about a 1/4 of an inch, even 1/8 of an inch from that top. Now I'm going to go back to my body and decide which side you want to be the front. So the front's going to be either one of these long sides, the shorter sides are the sides. So I like to see what the pattern's looking like, what my preference is. So I think I'm probably going to go with this one. Sometimes it depends on if these came out nicer, whichever side you want to do. So if that's going to be my front, I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to line up the back seam of this skirt with the back center like so. In terms of how high up you want this, that's the bottom of the body, and you're looking at about 1 inch that you're going to come up. And I'm going to stick a pin right in that center, not on my stitches, either just below or just above the stitches, and poke that in to hold that spot. Next, I'm going to leave this attached. Next, we're going to come to the front and I'm going to pull on this till I kind of roughly find the center, and I'm going to pin that roughly in the center of the front. And again, I'm looking for about an inch from the bottom, and I'm going to put the pin in there just below. And then I'm going to hold on either side. I'm going to hold my finger there and my finger there, pull here at the side, find the approximate center, and then put that there. I'm up a little high just from eyeballing it. There's probably good. And then do the exact same on the final side. This is going to help keep your gathers even as you start to pull this tightly. And that looks good. Okay, so find where the back is, because that's where your running thing is. And I'm just going to put one finger on each of these pins so that they don't come out on me. I'm going to give a gentle pull, and that should gather everything in. And once you do that, you might go around, and if something shifted down or up on you, you can just kind of even it out. But leave those pins in as you start to sew. So I'm back here. I'm going to take just a starting stitch. There we go. And now between these two pins, I'm going to try to even out these gathers a little bit. And then just again do another running stitch basically over top of the one that you already have in there. And this time you're attaching this skirt directly to the body. Okay, and as you come around, you can start to pull. I like to leave the first pin in so that I know that I've come all the way around in the end. So again, I'm just shifting these roughly so that they're all the way around. Okay, so now we're going to take, you can use, I prefer using a more like a 5-inch needle. A 3 can work if that's all that you have. You're just basically making placements. So you're going to make sure this is now my back is facing me. Actually, I want my front to face me like that. And I'm going to look at the top, and I want to stick that in where I want my arms to come in. So we'll do a measurement in a second, but about there. So these are, sorry, I keep flipping units on you. This is about a 1/2 inch from the top. It's down, and they're side to side, and I'm slightly towards behind the center line. So a little bit behind towards the back, and a 1/2 inch down is how you want to have that placed. Next, take your awl, and we're going to come in, and I'm going to go into that first opening that was made. And if you can either take this back out and come through the other side, but I always like to try to see if I can find that other side with my awl, and then really push in, because what you're going to want is another one of these pipe cleaners. And the way to get that in there is hold this tight, have your awl. You may have to come back in. Sometimes it works the first time. Sometimes I got to go in a few times with the awl. And I've got a nice opening there. And I'm just pushing my pipe cleaner in. And you want to move this pipe cleaner around till it looks about even on either side. And next, take your glue gun and just give a little bit of glue around that base so it doesn't shift on you. Just like that. Okay. And let that dry. Meanwhile, come back to the arms, and so with your hemostats, go in and grab this gathered part. And you don't want to pull it all the way through. You'll have a tougher time. So you're just going to go basically enough so that you've just exposed that top area, and then maybe a 1/4 inch down with turning that out. And I'm going to do that same thing with this one. And I'm going to stick my awl. I know that my bottom of the shirt is here, and I'm going to use the awl to help open up that gathered opening, and I'm just going to stick it through like that. Okay, and I'm going to do the same with the other side. All right, the next step is you're going to want to glue this surface to here. You don't need a lot. I just add a round of hot glue. You could just use white glue, whatever you want. And then you're going to want to push that gathered area on and just let it set itself. Leave it alone for a moment. And I'm going to come onto this side and do the same thing. So while those are drying, we can already go ahead and get the apron on. So the apron, you're going to want to find matching thread. Decide what you want to be the top. I have a little weird wrinkle in this fabric that I can't seem to get rid of, so that's going to be my top because it's going to be gathered. And I'm just going to go in from behind and just do a quick little gathering stitch about a 1/4 inch from the top. And then here, I'm going to decide where I want it to go. I'm about a 1/2 inch from even a full inch from that side, and just eyeball it. Pop a needle in there or pin. But then I'm going to try to find kind of roughly the same spot on this side that our apron looks centered. And I'll pull this gently tight and see how it looks. If you need to make adjustments, you can, but that looks pretty good. I'm going to make sure that that is pulling my gathers nicely. And I'm going to start to stitch backwards on myself. So that'll keep things from shifting so much on me once I get that in place. And now I'm going to come in and adjust these gathers a little bit across. So I just have a little bit moving around. And I'm just really going through to the skirt. I'm not necessarily going through the body. You can. It's not necessary because that's already attached. The other nice thing to get done before you deal with the arms, because they're nicely tucked out of the way at the moment, is the apron strings. So I've got some crochet thread here, and hopefully a needle that's eye is big enough. And I just take a nice long length going to knot that bottom end. And I'm going to come in behind this apron to hide that knot. I'm going to follow it around, put my thumb there, and cut it about the same length, maybe a smidge more of that skirt. So I'll cut it there. And then I'm going to do the same to the other side. All right, and then I'm just going to tie it at the back. This is more for appearance than actual holding anything on. But I do like to make it as tight as I can. And then I'll just add in some nice bows. And then I'll knot it. So I'll come like that. Make sure these are heading downwards. And that these are the length that I want them. A little more on that one. And do the knot. Okay. All right, the next step is to get these arms put on. So what I do here is I'm going to pull that up a little bit more. You can see why we left it folded over for now. And I'm going to put this on. You kind of want a half inch to a little bit before. So these are, I've slid this in and I'm going to twist them together. And it's very easy to do that because it is pipe cleaner. Okay. And then if you want to really make sure that that is stuck on, you can add a little bit of glue to ensure that that is going to hold in place, and make sure that's turned downwards. And we'll do the same to this side. All right, so now that these are dry, I can go ahead and pull my sleeve down. And now you're going to come in with your matching thread and do a bit of a gather down at the wrist. So I'm going to come up maybe a half inch and do a small running stitch around. Right, and we'll do the same to the other side. Okay, so you can already fold these arms down at the sides. All right, so that's the body complete. So now at this point, my head looks pretty dry, and I'm gonna grab my arsenal. So these are a few that I just made ahead of time just to show you some options. These were made using a combination of some markers and pastels. So for pastels, I've been really enjoying working with these Pitt pastels. The tips don't break very easily, which is nice. They get good color coverage and they're blendable. So they've been working really well. So I've been using that a lot in this kind of work. I also have a very good pencil sharpener, and this one gets them sharp without breaking them. These Tombow markers, they do bleed a little bit, but it's the only darker brown that I have. The best ones are always these jelly roll markers for in terms of bleed. They don't bleed on you. So I've got a few of those and these other colors, and I've got a little blending stick there. So I'm going to take you through. You can either take a white and go through these eyes. So these kind of softer eyes were done completely using pastels. These ones were a combination. These ones were mostly marker, to be honest with you. So you can decide what kind of look you want. I think I'm going to do pastels for this one. There we go. So I'm going to just come in and color in. Now what you can do is just even do the outsides, because the middle is going to have an eye color. And find that as you go, this can totally cover your assist lines that you had when you were making the eyes. So that works. For eye color, I'm going to go with this darker one. I do like to get these to a nice point. Like that. I find doing it all in the pastels gives a really like a softer look. Okay, like that. And then I might do a light brown to try to do a bit of a softer upper outline. Just to define it a little bit. And then I think that's pretty good. Now for the pupil, I do like to use my black jelly roll marker. I'm just going to do a good sized pupil. And then I'll let that dry a moment before we put the highlight in. Okay. So while that dries, I'm going to go on in with back to this dark color, and I'm going to try to pull her chin down. I'm going to do my best just to really get at that line to define it for her mouth. Start there. And then I'm going to pick another darker red color and try to go in over top. I don't want her to have big lips. I kind of just want a defined mouth. You, of course, can do whatever you would like. Okay, and then I might come in there and soften it a little if I can. There, and then push it back up so you can kind of see where the mouth is. Okay, now I can probably go back on those eyes. So I've got a white in the jelly roll. I'm just going to make sure that's going. I put a little dot just towards the side. So on that one, I've got it on the kind of the outside of the pupil, and this one is kind of on the inside. So they look a little realistic. And then at this point, I like to come in with some blush colors. So I might do a brighter blush for her. So I'm just going to use the side of this one and gently go over. You can use like Royal Blush if you would like, or whatever. And that's a bit harsh for me. So then I'm just going to come in with my finger and smooth it out a little. You can do that as much as you want. Okay. That just adds a nice color in her cheeks. All right. You can add some to her nose if you want. Totally up to you. Then I like to come in and darken a few of these darker line areas just with my lighter brown. I don't want to go too dark on them, so I'm going to stick her nose in and really try to cover up this stitch line. And then once you go over that, you can try to bring it out a little bit. If you can get in there, try to pull some of that color out into like a shadow. Okay, and then you come into some of these creases even. So I've got a crease there, so I can lean it out, kind of come in it a little bit. Try to soften it if you can, and then push it back. And that just helps define a few of the wrinkles. You can even like use the side to do a very gentle movement. Come into that nostril area. If it's too defined and you don't like it, you can just kind of smooth it out so it blends back out. And I do like to definitely get these because they are fairly white, and I want to make them into more of a defined line. And again, try to get that in a little. All right, and yeah, you just kind of, this is where I start to play. I probably shouldn't play too much at the bottom because that is going to be covered by her head scarf. But you do a few spots on her nose. This laugh line. Yeah, I don't want to go too crazy on it. Oh, eyebrows. I still have to do her eyebrows. So with eyebrows, I'm going to start with the lighter brown. You can start with a pencil if you're worried about going on here. I just start light first and get something drawn in. And then if you want them a bit darker, you can just go over top of that. Okay, and if you want to, you can come back in and go further with defining this eye line. Do a little bit at the bottom. I don't like to come right to the edge of the bottom or it starts to look like makeup. But if you go just underneath that pupil area, I like that. And then, yeah, you can spend lots of time on this. So these are, she's got a smaller mouth than this one. This one's got the features. You can see they're a little sharper when they're done with the marker in the eyes. I think I'll take her eyebrows a little bit further because I do like them a little darker. But then that's probably it for her. And then what you're gonna want to do is spray it with a fixative. It will keep the pastel from rubbing off on you. So after you've done this, you're going to spray it with a fixative spray. I'll link it in the pattern, the one that I like to use. And then just let that dry and then you're good to go. All right, so now we have our head. And I've got my kerchief. So the first thing is actually to put the head on the body, and that's just done with some hot glue. So I'm going to put the hot glue on the body. It's at the top. And where all of those pieces, all those quadrants come together, stick that directly on. And then you're just going to have to hold it in place. And you're going to take your kerchief, find approximately the halfway mark, and that you're going to line up with the center top and glue, just tack it in place basically along here. Yep. Okay, and then you want that to go a little bit of glue. Just like that. So you're gonna want needle and thread. Okay, and I'm gonna come in behind here from the back to the front to hide my knot, like that. And then bring this down, and I'm gonna come through that corner where it's meeting the neck. And this is where you can pull down on it to pull that head a bit forward. And then I'm gonna come back through there, and I'm gonna actually pull this down on the other side and go through the headscarf on that side. So it'll help draw that head down, and it'll pull this in nicely around her head. So I'm just gonna go back and forth a couple of times with the stitches. Okay. And then we're gonna go pull this down, and then you'll get a rough sense of where her neck is just from pulling it down. I can judge it's around where the tips of my fingers are. So now I'm going to go around in that area and just do a small gathering stitch. Okay, and then you're just going to pull it tight. Try to pull this out so that you don't see the back side of the fabric. That's going to tighten that up. The front looks good. Got the little head. She's adorable. So the next step is we can put something in her hand. So there's lots of options here. If this is flipping off on you, you can always add a little drop of glue under there too. I'm gonna pop this in her hand. So remember she's able to grab things. In fact, I might do this in one hand. Okay. So normally I'll come back in here after, but I will do a small little stitch in here to make sure that stays like it is. These lightly stained bowls. So for some of these things, they work better if you use some instant glue. Like the bowl works really well. The instant glue really works well against the wood and the fabric. So I have some here if there's still something left in this one. And I'm just going to throw a bit on the bowl. Get her hand on there. You don't want to glue yourself. You can do her riding a broom is quite adorable. I'll show you that in a moment. There we go. Okay, so that's one of them. Oh, and then her hanging string. I just use that same crochet thread. And I judge from the top. Some of them you want to go further back on. It depends on how you want her to hang. So this is just me looking at it, seeing how the weight is holding her. I got that through there. I just do a simple knot at the top, nothing fancy. You can put something in the bowl too if you wanted. There we go. that's the kitchen witch. And then I've got one over here that I had done. This was actually one of the first ones, and she's riding a broom. And the way that I did that was I flattened her skirt in underneath that little body that she has. And then I had a broom, and this broom, I made it how long? I made it about 9 inches long, not including the grapevine. This was made out of wrapped twine in the floral section at Michael's, and I like to twist the end a little bit over a knitting needle or something. And it's the same broom that I've been doing with my Harriet dolls as well. And then I just throw some stitches in once I have it visually where I want it. I just throw some stitches into it to hold it in place, and then she looks like she's flying. So yeah, that is the little kitchen witch. I hope you enjoy making her.